Thanks, Paul, again, and welcome everyone. So today I'm going to basically show you the possibilities around Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat API, which is in the public preview. Before I start, a little bit about myself. I'm Siddharth Vaghasia. I'm from Pune, India. I'm a Microsoft MVP, and I basically like to contribute to the community. I had been into this demo many a times, and also contribute all to the sample galleries and everything. So idea and driving factor, it was very simple. Like when the Copilot, Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat API basically was released, that is where I wanted to basically see what are the capabilities which are available, how the request and the response, or how the endpoints are structured, what kind of request we can send, what kind of response we are getting, understanding the structure of the response which we are getting, and how we can basically kind of leverage into our SPFx applications. So as Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat API is part of our Microsoft Graph itself, making the API calls was one thing which is very much similar to any other Graph API which we call. But because this was the new endpoint, the idea was that how we can basically be able to leverage that into our SPFX solutions, right? Because many organizations or since so many years we had built so many of SPFX solutions with our custom business data, SharePoint data, OneDrive data, or any external data which is there. And if you wanted to add some AI capability into your existing solution, and if you have your Copilot license already available, then why do you want to have to rely on any external AI APIs which are available, right? We can basically definitely leverage the Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat API, which is still basically very much similar to how Microsoft 365 Copilot works with enterprise grounding and with the existing data, with security trim permissions and everything. So with chat API also similar kind of security trimming, similar kind of access to the data for the current logged in user under which we are running. All of that is basically available. So that was the whole idea. And just to understand how we can basically also pass some contextual data from our SPFX solution to the API, what are the possibilities which are available. So that was the idea. So this sample was created as a playground for me to just basically explore what is how this Copilot Chat API can be used, and we will see it in the demo. So before we go into demo and the code walkthrough, like let us first also understand like how the Copilot Chat API endpoints are there, right? So in a way, there are to basically make an API call to Copilot Chat. What we would have to do is we have two-step process. First thing is we need to make uh, a post call to conversation endpoint, which is basically an empty JSON body object, which is going to give us the conversation ID in return. And then in the step two, where is where we have to basically make the API call to chat endpoint, okay, where we have to pass the conversational endpoint as part of the URL itself, right? And this is where we are, whatever user message we are going to send or whatever extra contextual resources which we are going to send would be passed as part of the body object in the step two. And then the chat API would basically be able to respond to us. And we will see how the responses, what attributes which we are getting. And that is how, two-step process works. Now, if you there is one more optional way wherein the like the first endpoint which I talked about is a synchronous call. It means that the API would basically wait for us to, we have to wait for the API to respond it back and then give it. But if you wanted to basically build some additional feature where you wanted to chat it over the stream, right, wherein by default any conversation which happens, you are streaming the responses, and that is where you can use the chat over stream endpoint, which is very much similar. The request of the body object and the response and everything is kind of similar, but because it's a multi-turn conversation, how the responses are going to get, you would have to handle it differently when you are basically reading the response back. With that, we also wanted to understand the permissions, right? Because as I said, it is part of the graph endpoint, and this is a screenshot taken from the official Microsoft documentation where you can see that the Copilot Chat API doesn't support any kind of application permissions. It means it is going to always run under the current logged in users permission itself, right? And if you see, because it's heavily relies on the search and the Copilot Chat API, this thing, the data which the user is going to have, it needs all this kind of permissions, which is basically site, mail, people, online meeting, transcription, channel, and everything. And if you think about it, these are the similar kind of prompts or similar kind of questions which the user is going to ask to Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat API to basically increase their productivity and respond to the data which under which they are using or they are part of, right? So this is just also to understand that, okay, this kind of permissions would be required whenever you are building this solution, as in any graph endpoint which you are calling. Same way here also we have a permission matrix which we have to use. So with that, let us go to the demo. So the demo is simple in a way. I didn't make it any fancy UI or something because just wanted to explore. But if you see here, we have a simple text box where user can basically ask any questions, and then there is a button which user is going to send the message. So what I will do is I will just say, let me know if any upcoming meetings. Right. And this is a simple example where I just wanted to show that we are basically passing the user message to the chat API and getting the response back, right? And this can be as simple as how we are basically talking to a Microsoft 365 Copilot itself. But in the next one, we will also see how we can pass the contextual information to the chat API, which is also able to give us the response back. So if you see here, what it did, it created the conversation ID, which was the first API call which I talked about, and then I like, for the simplicity or for understanding it better, I have two type of responses which it is displaying. As I said, this is a playground. So you can see that we are getting the conversation ID, what is basically the user message which has gone, and what is the response which the bot has sent. Okay, bot means the Copilot which has sent, and it says that I have an upcoming meeting on my calendar, which is a community demo which has been organized, right? And if you see at the row response, right, and this is what we have to understand, that what kind of objects, what kind of attributes are going to be returned, and what is important for us to parse and how it is going to respond it back. That is what, basically was the whole idea. So if you see here on the top level, we have some basic attributes, the created date time, the display name of basically, which is that user text message which was been sent. But this you can consider it as a conversation title itself, right? And then the messages. So the first message would be the message which the user has sent, and if you go down, the second message is where the Copilot has responded back. And the text attribute is very much important because this is from where we are going to get the actual responses from the chat API, right? And then there are some attributions and the citations and sensitive level which is coming. Okay, I'm going to show you one more example before I go to the code walkthrough. In this case, what I'm doing is I'm just reading the shared document library and displaying the data. What I wanted to do is I wanted to pass the context. So I'm going to say summarize this file, right? So it means that with the Copilot Chat API, and if we look at the documentation also, there is a way for us to basically pass some contextual information to the chat API, right? Wherein you can pass the URI and everything of the document. So I'm using this concept and basically passing the user selected file to the chat API, and then the response is getting back. So if you see here, what it did is it has basically summarized the file which I had passed as a contextual information, and it is giving me the response, and then we are displaying it in the responses format itself. So yeah, with that, let me go to the code walkthrough. To start with, basically a simple user interface, as we have seen, an input text box and a button and a reset conversation ID button which would be there. Then as in second step, what we have is these main method, which is the send chat message. So this method is important because this is what I talked about in the slide itself. First, what we need to do, I'm using for the simplicity, I'm using the graph client object itself to make the graph call. So first, what we are doing is we are making the post request with an empty body object to the conversation endpoint, which is going to return as the conversation ID. If we already have the conversation ID, then it is not going to make this API call. If not, then if we already have it, then it is going to go and make the actual endpoint. Now, this is where I was talking about the contextual information. So if you see, we displayed some documents from the library, and user select some file. So what we are doing, this is the piece of code which is basically creating that request body object or the chat payload object, which we have to pass it to the chat API, right? And it goes like this, wherein within the payload we need to have a contextual resource attribute, and where we can pass basically the array of the files which is been written, and then the actual call to the chat API via conversation. And once the API call has been made, whatever response we are getting, we are just storing it into the state object, right? And the third thing is you can see there are two types of responses which I was displaying. One was the row response. So I'm using pre-HTML tag to basically directly display the JSON format. So it basically displays the row JSON response as it is. And then we have the React Markdown. So React Markdown language library is basically which is giving us the text messages, which is a Markdown type of response which we get from the chat API. And it displays it beautifully in the UI, so that you can feel like, you know, whatever formatted response which you are getting from the chat API is also being displayed here. So this is, I mean, again, a existing library which we are using here. And then, of course, don't forget to add the permissions which we talked about in our package solution.json file, so that whenever the solution would be deployed, the permissions are being asked for, and the tenant admin can basically, sorry, SharePoint admin can basically go and approve the permission itself. Okay. So yeah, so this was the code walkthrough. But just before I wind up, I also wanted to see that for there was an existing basically prompt sample gallery solution which was contributed by Saurabh. So what I did is, I just to make little bit interesting the same existing solution, wherein we were seeing all the prompts samples which are been contributed by the community in an SPFx web part. I modified the same web part just to basically integrate the Copilot Chat API, so that you can directly try that prompt from there and there itself. So if you see here, I'm just going to try one, which is basically list the meeting invites from the existing one. And when you click on try this prompt, what it will do is it will ask you for the input also. So this is a little bit feature wherein, because the prompt has some placeholder, and the placeholders needs to be, added by the user. So I just basically by using some kind of regular expression, find the placeholders and create a dynamic input. So if there are multiple placeholders, the UI would be able to ask you multiple placeholders, and then create the dynamic prompt, and then send it to Copilot Chat API, and the responses would be there. So we should see the response now. So if you see here, the response is that show me list of all the attendees from the meeting community demo, which I have already set it up as the test. And then I'm just passing the same prompt, and whatever response we are getting, I'm displaying it here in the user interface. So this is just to, I mean, not to reinvent the wheel, and there was already an awesome sample prompt, PNP sample prompt sample which was available. So I updated it and integrated with Copilot Chat API, and had created the pull request, so that, people can basically try the prompt there and there itself. So with that, yes, I mean, that's it from my side. Back to you, Paul. Thank you.